Let's begin. Since 1943, Hitler knew he was losing the war, but he still held out hope that peace negotiations could be held. Then, in early 1945, his enemies pushed further towards Berlin. The Soviet Red Army was determined to crush Germany, led by Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, whom Hitler had the audacity to call a barbarian, and in January killed 450,000 Germans. In the next 3 months, 280,000 were killed. This was a higher number of German casualties than in 1943 and 1944, showing the stubbornness of the Nazis in refusing to accept defeat. Then in February, Hitler's commander in Hungary saw his men descend into a state of utter gloom, and Germans fled their homes as the Soviets entered. One woman wrote, "The world is a very lonely place, without family, friends, or even the familiarity of home." In April, a Russian soldier wrote to his beloved back home, "At first the Nazis fought hard, but they could not endure this hell, and soon it would all be over." Then on the 16th of April, Soviet troops finally invaded Berlin. Residents heard gunfire at close range, and some ran to the shops for food, while the Germans emptied the prisons and shot the prisoners who were there. German firing squads killed dozens of people who were considered unsupportive of the regime. Hitler also began recruiting young children to fight. One woman described seeing the faces of little children emerging from under the large steel helmets, which she said was contrary to human nature. The historian Max Hess wrote in his book Inferno that the Germans were well aware that they would receive no mercy from the Red Army, and it was a matter of responding or being killed. During those few days, Hitler sat in his bunker with the Reich chancellors after hearing the news of the death of US President Roosevelt on April 12, hoping that the new President Harry Truman would sign the peace treaty, which of course did not happen. Hitler suffered a breakdown on April 22 when he heard that his orders for a counterattack had not been followed, and he shouted and cursed those he said had betrayed him. That day, Hitler himself finally admitted that it was all over, 2 days after his birthday, before emerging from his bunker to greet some of the attendees. He returned to the bunker knowing that his life would soon end. He said that he would marry his mistress Eva Braun, while she was preoccupied with hiding her precious jewelry. In her last letter to her friend Herta Oster, she wrote that no jewelry should be found under any circumstances. Near the end, several of Hitler's inner circle made plans to escape from Berlin. Hermann Koch was one of them. On his birthday, Georg told Hitler that he had work to do and needed to go to southern Germany, but in reality he was trying to ship his stolen art treasures out of Berlin. He was worried about losing items of monetary value. Hitler did not know long after. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary and Nazi Party chancellor, also fled after seeing his leaders end. Then there was propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. As the people of Berlin endured unimaginable agony in late April, Goebbels issued a final proclamation: "I call on you to fight for your city. Fight with all you have for your wives, your children, and their mothers, and I bless you." Then on April 27, Hitler received another piece of news. He heard on a BBC report that President Henry had tried to negotiate a surrender with the enemy, which angered Hitler, who ordered their arrest before he too went into hiding and died. At midnight on April 28, Hitler married Eva Braun. Goebbels and his daughter were present at the ceremony. With the Red Army approaching, this was not a particularly convenient event. At one point, Braun signed the marriage contract, also writing her full name, crossing out the B and writing Hitler. Hitler's barber, Augusto John Holmes, usually came to trim Hitler's mustache at around 11 a.m. This was also the time when his valet Heinz visited him each morning. Afterwards, Hitler prepared himself, Linger read him the morning papers. One day before his death, Hitler was not in a particularly good mood. He looked at Linger seriously and said, "You must never allow a body to fall into Russian hands." It was almost a blur. Lang then gave Hitler some cocaine drops for his aching right eye and some pills for flatulence. Hitler suffered from a number of health problems towards the end, taking about 28 different medications. One of his men described him as being like a ghost. "He did not seem to see me or anyone, he was lost in thought." At that moment the bunker shook with a strong earthquake when a bomb fell. At about that time Hitler heard the news that the Italian fascist leader Mussolini had died and been executed. What Hitler knew was that his fate would be the same or worse. He also heard that Mussolini and his mistress had been executed and thrown like dead cattle in the Piazza Lorenzo in Milan.